gremlins! Today I'm going to learn about and draw another aesthetic, chosen by my random wheel of aesthetics. The aesthetic the wheel chose this week is... Fairy Academia. Fairy Academia is a niche offshoot of dark academia, taking inspiration from old children's fantasy novels and illustrations, as well as a romanticized idea of Victorian and Edwardian childhoods. The aesthetic was originally named and created by one user of the aesthetic wiki, and is still little known compared to other academia aesthetics. The academic part of this aesthetic involves an interest in fairies and fairy-related history and stories, from Western European folklore to Shakespeare plays that involve fairies and magic, such as A Midsummer Night's Dream and The Tempest, as well as historical moments like the Cottingley Fairy Hoax. The Cottingley Fairy Hoax, in simple terms, involved two young Edwardian girls photographing paper cutouts of fairies, which people, including Arthur Conan Doyle, author of Sherlock Holmes, believed were proof of real fairies. If this sounds at all interesting to you, I recommend watching the Kaz Rowe video on the subject, which is very informative and entertaining, and linked in the description and cards. Visuals of Fairy Academia include the recognizable style of Cicely Mary Baker's fairy illustrations, as well as storybooks and fairy tales, Victorian and pre-Raphaelite paintings, florals, lace, pastels, tea parties, and wildflowers. In this illustration, I decided to use visuals of picnics, reading, wildflowers, nature, and vintage clothing, and set the Fairy Academia character on a picnic blanket in a meadow reading. Reading is a big part of the Fairy Academia aesthetic, especially reading mythology, fairy tales, poetry, and old fantasy books. Other Fairy Academia activities include walking in nature, picking flowers, pressing and preserving those flowers, sketching, sewing, cooking, dancing, playing harmless pranks and causing mischief, and having tea parties and picnics. Fairy Academia fashion mixes vintage styles with whimsy, and unlike other academia aesthetics, doesn't have a particularly academic or preppy look. Fairy Academia clothing includes floaty pastel dresses and party dresses, button-up shirts and blouses, long flowy skirts, ribbons and bows, flowers in the hair and flower crowns, corsets, Mary Jane's, Oxfords, or ballet flats as shoes, straw hats, pea coats, and solid pastel tights. In general, outfits look like they could have been worn by an upper-class girl or young woman in Victorian or Edwardian England, at least through the vibes, if not entirely historically accurate. Hair can be long and loose, threaded with flowers, or braided with ribbons. The Fairy Academia colour palette is pastel and muted, including sage green, muted pinks and purples, ivory, and light brown. I gave this Fairy Academia character a pinafore dress over a slightly puff-sleeved blouse. She has nearly white tights and Mary Jane-style shoes. I gave her a straw hat with flowers around the brim, and she has more flowers, picked from the meadow around her, threaded through her braid. Her pose was a bit tricky, as I haven't tried to pose someone half-reclining like this in a while. However, I think I made it work. Her knee-length skirt helps hide any errors I might have made. She's propped up with one arm, looking down at the illustrated book of fairy tales in front of her, and another book is nearby. The closed book has an illustration of a fairy sitting on a mushroom embossed on the cover. The open book is open to a page of text beside a full-page illustration of a fairy looking down in a puddle of water. I gave this character dark brown hair, and her clothing is mostly green with highlights of pink. Her pinafore is sage green, with ruffled sleeves and a knee-length skirt, which isn't historically accurate, but I'm not going for accuracy. This girl is a modern girl who likes the aesthetic of older times. She has brown skin and brown eyes, and her eyes were another part of this illustration that proved difficult. Her face is slightly tilted down, but I still wanted it to be visible, so her eyes needed to be looking further down to see her book. I haven't drawn eyes like this before, and I needed to make sure they didn't look like she was sleepy or annoyed with half-lidded eyes. She's sitting on an iconic red and white picnic blanket. Beside her, I began to draw a bouquet of wildflowers she picked before settling down to read. I chose some species that are fairly easy to draw and recognizable, including the same daisies I put in her hair. She also picked some poppies, some Queen Anne's lace, and some little pink flowers that aren't meant to be a specific species. Those same species of flowers are growing at the front of the image, overlapping the picnic blanket and the girl's feet. I kept adjusting these flowers to have proper scale and take up the amount of space I wanted them to take up. Behind the girl stretches a slightly hilly grassy meadow, also dotted with those same flowers. Near the blanket, the flowers are clear and detailed. More large stalks of Queen Anne's lace and more poppies and daisies. Further into the background, I just suggest the presence of flowers, with smudges of colour in the green grass. The sky is bright blue, filled with puffy white clouds. With the background mostly done, I will go back and add some shading to the flowers later, but although I plan to do more, I think the background looks pretty good already. I return to the character who is the main focus of the drawing, to begin shading her hair, her skin, and the rest of her body and clothing. In a sunny field like this, I probably should have given this character more dynamic shading, but shading like that takes a lot longer, and this drawing was already dragging over several days based on limited access to being able to charge my computer to work. Instead, I'll just say the clouds in the sky are making the light in this image softer, easier to work with. I shaded her body in sections, starting with her legs and feet. Her skirt was particularly fun to shade, as skirts usually are for me. The skirt wrinkles up where it's warped by her hand on the picnic blanket, as well as over her legs, giving me lots of details to shade. The ruffles on the pinafore's sleeves were also really fun to shade, and I think they turned out really well. I finished the shading of the girl by adding woven texture to her straw hat. Then I began to add shadows to the blanket beneath her, under her legs and skirt, and under the books. Then I began adding a little bit more detail to the wildflowers in the foreground. I differentiated between the poppy's petals so they aren't just solid red blobs, and added a little shading to the daisy's petals as well. I tried shading the stems too, but it didn't work out very well, so I left them mostly flat. I was planning on making the flowers more detailed and intricately shaded, but they were already looking good, if simplified. I did add more detailed shading to the bouquet of flowers beside the girl on the picnic blanket, and that didn't work out very well. Luckily, the bouquet isn't large or a focus of the image. Finally, I added some golden sunlight to make the image a little more dynamic, and added some dust or pollen flecks floating through the air for some subtle extra detail, and this image is complete. If you like it, it is now available for download on my Etsy, link in the description. I worked on this image in pieces over the course of a week, and I think it came together really well. I tried adding a few new things with this image, including having a more dynamic pose and drawing wildflowers, and I think they worked to make the drawing interesting. While fairy academia visually isn't my aesthetic, I prefer darker aesthetics, I do like the subject matter. Fairies have always fascinated me, from when I was a kid and believed they were real, till now reading about fairy mythology in my free time. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, bye!